Welcome to A Seat at the Table, conversations about bold leadership, equity, and innovation. I'm Lynette Fraga, CEO of Childcare Aware of America, the nation's leading voice on childcare. Throughout this series, we discuss the essential role of our children, our families, and our community to catalyze a thriving society. So pull up a chair and let's get started. Today is a very special episode because this conversation is part of a virtual event series hosted by my organization, Childcare Aware of America. During our month-long event series, we have been exploring how we can transform the childcare system. Today is also a special recording because I have not one, but 3 guests, and they are part of the documentary film, Through the Night. Through the Night is an intimate portrait of 3 working mothers whose lives all intersect at a 24-hour childcare center. The film showcases the multiplicity of, quote, women's work, paid, underpaid, and unpaid, emotional and physical, domestic and career-oriented, all while negotiating the terms of a dignified existence. Through the Night is a New York Times critics' pick and was selected for a world premiere at the 2020 Tribeca Film Festival. Loira Limbal is an Afro-Dominican filmmaker and DJ interested in the creation of art that is nuanced and revelatory for communities of color. She is the Senior Vice President of Programs at Firelight Media. She is a Sundance Institute Fellow, NAACP Image Award nominee, and she lives in the Bronx with her 2 children. I am also honored to have with me today Deloris and Patrick Hogan. They are the co-founders and primary care providers at Tots Daycare in New Rochelle, New York. Deloris and Patrick, affectionately known as Nunu and Pop Pop, to the hundreds of children they've cared for over the years, continue to provide the safety net needed by so many working parents. As part of our virtual event series this month, and on behalf of the many childcare professionals, advocates, and community leaders who are tuning in, welcome.
Oh, thank you for the invitation and for the warm welcome. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. There is so much to get to, and unfortunately we don't have hours and hours of time. So I'd love to be able to jump right in and start from the beginning. Loida, why this film? Why this story? What inspired you?
Sure. So the inspiration for the film really came from an afternoon where I found myself reading an article that was focused on sort of the economy and work in the United States. And it was drawing attention to the reality that in the United States, more and more people have to work multiple jobs to make ends meet, and that many of those jobs often require overnight hours or sort of irregular schedules. And it was posing the question of, given that reality, who then looks after people's children? And they profiled Nunu and Patrick and some of the families who depend on them for care. And as I was reading the article, the sort of sensation that I had was I was reading my mother's story, and I was reading my childhood story. I am the oldest of 4 children, raised by a single immigrant Black mother in New York City who worked as a home health aide throughout our childhood, made minimum wage, and didn't have a whole lot of flexibility, home health aide. It's another caregiver role that is severely underpaid and undervalued in the United States. And so it was the kind of job where if a babysitter canceled or a family member flaked, she couldn't really just call out sick last minute. As the oldest of the 4, at a pretty early age, I became, the childcare for my younger siblings and also her right hand, in many ways. And so this article just kind of
spoke to you.
My memory of my whole life, and then I am also a single working mother myself now. And although my circumstances are different than my mother's, I certainly have had my fair share of challenges. And so it just really felt like it just captivated me. And as a filmmaker, I immediately thought that, this daycare or this childcare center rather, and this community would make an amazing film, partly because this is it speaks to so many things that are so common in communities of color and low income and working class communities, but it's really invisible. In our mainstream. We don't really talk about these issues. We don't see it anywhere. And
let me stop you right there, Loida, for a minute, because you raised two things that I think are just so critical. One, the caregivers, and two, the invisibility often of caregivers and others that are going through these experiences. Did you anticipate the power of the stories that you were telling around the invisibility felt or seen through that camera? These individuals and their stories like really jumped through the screen. Did you anticipate that power?
I did. I mean, and I don't say that to say, I'm some sort of genius or anything, but, for me, when we were filming, as you're filming, you see things and you hear things and you immediately in the moment recognize the power, right, of the person or the moment or the act, the gesture that is unfolding before your eyes and before the camera's eyes. And then, we also spent months editing the film. And so there was a lot of choice and selection, right, that goes into that process, And I think one of the things you touched on in terms of how relatable everyone is, that was part of how we chose who to focus on and which stories, to tell. And we had to choose because we couldn't tell every single family story in one film.
There was such respect and care. Certainly you saw that in Dolores's interactions and the love that she showed the children and the families that were in her orbit and Patrick's orbit for sure. But I was caught by how you as a filmmaker, and I don't know anything about filmmaking, but I sure know a lot about feeling the feelings that films create. It felt that you were creating visibility and these stories of these individuals in this childcare program, as well as the systemic stories. These really spoke into that the systems that we create hold individual people in those systems or don't, given the breakdown of those systems and maybe the structural racism and other sorts of implications that broken systems have. And I think you made really visible both the humanity, but also the cracks in the systems as a result. And just curious about, as a filmmaker doing that so beautifully, how do you see your role in telling those stories as a leader? Because you are.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think about that from a couple different perspectives. One is that one of the kind of key beliefs that I have as an artist is that cultural change precedes social and political change, which is why, every couple of decades we find ourselves stuck in these culture wars, right? And culture is the space where the values that sort of underpin a society and that serve as the foundation for then all the systems, that's where that is established and taught and replicated, right? And reproduced. And so the space of art and culture is critical. And I do see myself as an artist, with that lens, right, of like trying to create art that can contribute to us shifting our lenses, our understanding, our narratives from things that we have been taught or things that we have been told are normal. It is deeply problematic that we live in a country where someone can be working 3 jobs and still find themselves in a position where they have to choose between paying rent or buying groceries. That there's nothing normal about. And we have been told that, this is just what it is and that's normal. There's that piece of it for me. The other piece is that I think a lot about is imagination. And again, change requires a lot of imagination. And in my mind, the world or the systems or the society that I would like to see, one where folks of color and Black people, where our humanity is deeply respected and cared for and centered, that world doesn't exist yet. I've never seen it. None of my ancestors have seen it. You know, to continue engaging in a fight for social change and social justice requires that you are constantly imagining something that you haven't seen yet. And I think that that's also where art and film and music and culture, just, you know, overall comes in. It feeds, it nurtures our imagination. It creates kind of the conditions, right, for us to envision the things that we want, not to just know what we don't want, you know, which is sometimes the space that we can get stuck in, you know, in movement conversations. We know what we don't want. We're not always so necessarily clear on what it is that we want.
We do want, right. Yeah. So I have two questions off of that. So it's a lot there. First, was there anything about the childcare story that surprised you?
Yes. One of the things that surprised me the most over the years of filming at the Child Care Center was the way that care was multi-directional. Yes, you know, you have obviously Nunu, Patrick, and the staff caring for the children. Then you have this other, perhaps less expected layer of Nunu and Patrick also caring for their parents and for the mothers, especially the single mothers. Then you have a less expected, you know, layer of the mothers caring for Nunu and Patrick and caring for other families and other members of the community. Then you have the children caring for each other, but then you also have the children caring for the adults. And there was like care was functioning on so many levels and working on so many different directions. And one of my kind of key takeaways when I had that realization was how valuable that is, that children are learning how to give and receive care in this community. And that's not something that we ever really talk about as something you teach. You know, it's not part of like any of the metrics we use to measure our children's education or development, but it is so fundamental, right? Because we will all need care.
Yes, you know? That is so powerful. That is so powerful, Loira, because we speak in our communities about how important childcare is, those of us that are in this space. And we approach our work from how comprehensive. When we talk about care, it's not only what's happening in that physical space. When we talk about care, we're talking about social emotional development. We're talking about relationships with families, relationships with providers, relationships with communities, relationships with services. I mean, there were lovely stories in this about communities coming together, even during a parade, right? There was this community parade where Deloris and Dee's Tots were coming together and they were playing a role. But what was happening around that parade, how she and others were connecting with each other around what may have been something hard. And it really was around community and it was around care. And I loved the way that you raised up that it's not necessarily didactic back and forth learning that's happening with children around care and the importance of care, but about the showing what care looks like and what caring looks like is so powerful, whether it's elder care or, you know, child care. What COVID, I think, has unveiled, something that many of us have known for generations, is how important care is. But unfortunately, what we've learned, and we learn in this, caregiving isn't necessarily given the respect for children and for families and for communities in the ways that they could. So I'm curious, as it relates to your lovely imagination language, is there something you would imagine for this system that would be more aligned with a just, re-envisioned, transition, transformed system?
Absolutely. You know, and we're in imagination land, so I'm going to be very creative here with
we love vision. Imagination land.
You know, in the film, we see Nunu gardening. You know, there's a scene where she's teaching Diana, one of the children she cares for, that, you know, strawberries apparently like to be placed close to the collard greens, and she's not quite sure why that is, but it helps both of them grow better. And it's something that she learned from her grandmother in Mississippi. And that moment I share because for me, it has the nugget of many things that are part of my vision. One is that the solutions that are going to work for all of us actually need to come from people like Nunu, the people for whom not only has the government and society at large neglected, but has actually actively harmed. So that for me is one, is that the solutions need to come from the people who have been in actuality providing a safety net for our communities, despite governments and politicians telling us that it is impossible to provide a safety net to working people. Then, drilling down a little bit deeper into the kind of that wisdom, right? That she's like telling you,
yes,
this is a diverse, complex ecosystem, right? And the diversity is actually the strength of it. All of these plants have different kinds of needs, the same way that the children in her community and the families in her community are very diverse, coming from different backgrounds, different situations, right? Everybody's not in the same socioeconomic bracket. Everybody has something different going on in their family, and that it is possible to care for everyone and to meet everyone's, very distinct needs and to have this kind of diverse ecosystem. When I say that Nunu and Patrick provide a safety net, they are filling so many different gaps beyond the childcare needs. They're a support system, they're a sounding board.
yes.
They are helping people navigate joblessness or
Hunger.
a parent has hunger, but they're also, a parent has an issue with one of their children's teacher.
Yes.
And they don't feel comfortable advocating. Nunu and Patrick will go into the school with that parent to help advocate alongside that mother. There's so many, right? Like there's so many layers of support that for me, it becomes, when you add it all up, it does become a social safety net. What if we could think about care in that way? That care is something that happens at a hyper local level, and that there are different centers of care for the most vulnerable members of our communities, but that it's like homegrown and community-based, and that we would see that and recognize that for its power, its expertise, its wisdom, and resource it accordingly.
Loira, I think that's beautiful. I think I really love the wisdom that you pulled from Deloris's statement about the garden. And the diversity is the strength of it. I love that because diversity is the strength of it. And centering solutions in the communities and the individuals that have the experience, the lived experience and the knowledge is just incredibly important. Your words and your film in many ways is such a gift of understanding and visibility for these early care and education providers and childcare providers all over the United States who each and every day, like Deloris, are caring for children, caring for communities, and caring for those relationships so that children can thrive. I do want to ask you a question. What advice you would provide to those that are curious about how they step into this moment and create influence? What would you say to them, no matter where their seat might be?
Yeah. I think one thing that comes to mind, I'm quoting Latasha Brown from Black Voters Matter and saying this. And she says, one piece of advice is for everyone to find a political home. And that could look like a church group. It could be a study group. It could be just neighbors. It could be anything. But the idea of having a space where you can learn from others and bounce ideas, off of others on a more kind of granular level, like a really concretely. I think they can follow your work and your website. They can certainly visit our website, which is just throughthenightfilm.com, and we have a resources page, and we have people often watching the film and asking like how they can help, how they can get involved, and we point them to the website.
Loira, you are amazing. Thank you so very much for activating your art, your creativity, your inspiration, your imagination, for putting your creativity and your talent to tell this story in sets of stories. So greatly appreciated. It has truly been an honor to have a conversation with you today.
Thank you.
There she is.
Hello, how are you guys doing?
Deloris, I have a special place in my heart for both you and Patrick because I myself was an infant toddler childcare provider. Both of you are superheroes. First, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story. I know in the documentary, Through the Night, that you shared a little bit about how you got into the field of early childhood and opening up your own program. What inspired you to say, okay, this is the space? I actually wrote down a quote that you said, Deloris, it's not just a job, this is our life.
Well, it's becoming my life because the children become a part of my life and their parents become a part of my life. How I got into childcare was, once again, it was a parent that was in need. She got into a bad car accident and my children's godfather came to me and said that, you know, she needs help. She's going to be in the hospital for quite a few months. He seen the way I was taking care of my children, and my children were small at the time. So could I take care of her? At the time, he was 18 months. So I told him it would be fine. It's just another addition to the family. It's not a problem. I have 3 children of my own already, so he'll be all right. The mother came home from the hospital. She walked in the door and she gave me like $1,500, which I didn't even ask her for money, but she gave it to me. And she was like, this is your calling. You should be childcare. You should be in childcare. Look what you did for my son. You got my son to eat food that he would never eat. My son only liked pizza and McDonald's. He's actually eating stews. He's eating rice and, gravy and different stuff. He's actually eating real food. That's what started it off. And then me and the mom became like best of friends till this day.
Deloris, as you're sharing about your story and reflecting on watching the film, what was so amazing to me is your relationships with the children and Patrick's relationships with the children. You watch this film and you can see how critical both the relationships with the children in your care and with families are to see and watch children thrive. How do you think about that? How do you navigate that?
To me, it's what you have in your heart. It's whatever you have in your heart and your soul. It's not hard work, because when you love people, you just love people, and that's just it. And in order for the children to be healthy and everything, the parents have to be healthy also. I have to make sure that the parents are safe. I have to make sure the parents are healthy, that they're okay, in order for the children to be okay. As long as you have happy adults around you, the children are going to be happy. So that's the main thing. It's all about love. This is a job that you have to have love, patience, compassion, and kindness. You have to have that in your heart if you're going to take care of people's children.
And you have a lot of colleague childcare providers who are listening and will be listening to this podcast, who are out and about all over the United States that are doing similar work to the work that you and Patrick do. And I'm curious about the messages that you would share with them about engagement with families and how important that is to their children's well-being. What does that actually look like, that compassion and kindness? And what do you think that families really need in the day-to-day?
It first starts with the child. Anytime a parent calls up to say that they would like to enroll their child in childcare, the first thing we ask is, will the child be with you when we schedule an appointment to sit down? Because if the child's not happy being here, then no one's going to be happy. And the child is the most important thing. And while Nunu usually is interviewing with the parent, if I'm around, I'll engage with the child. Even if it's getting on the floor with them, just playing with them, bringing them in the other room so they can see the other children and what's happening in the other room. And a lot of times the children will come with me and the parents see that. They say, and sometimes they'll say, they don't usually go with that. Oh, okay, there he is. And they're coming right along, even it could be the baby. It starts there because, again, if the child doesn't like the environment, then it's not going to work. So we form that relationship. And then everything else becomes natural. What does compassion looks like? It's just us. It's nothing that's rehearsed. It's just us thinking of each child that comes into our home as our child. This is how we would treat our children. Now, if you ask our children, they're going to say something different. They're not going to say the same thing. But love, what, but we treat each child that comes into our home as if they're our child. And sometimes we treat each parent as if they are our children as well, because they need someone to talk to. But most importantly, they need someone that they know that when they go off to work, that they don't have to worry, that everything is going to be okay. My child's not going to be hurt. My child's not going to be harmed. My child's going to get a good meal. My child is going to get nurturing, going to get love, going to get understanding. The children sometimes, I got to go home now. Can I stay a little while longer? We have another satisfied, we call them customers, when sometimes they cry when they have to leave. And the parents are going to say, they don't want to come home with me. They want to stay with you. Well, all we're doing is giving them love. We're not bribing them. We're just giving them love that they should get at home.
What strikes me about what you're saying, Patrick, was really beautifully shared in the story of the film. It strikes me the parade that was happening. And I loved these Tots and all, the community was really around children as you all surround children. It seems to me that what I really saw in this film was the child care program is a place and a space to feel a sense of belonging and relationships that you all have with families extends into the communities. What keeps you going as childcare providers and having a childcare program?
And I wake up in the morning. The first thing I do when I get out of bed is thank God for letting me get up. And then I ask him to, just help me get through my day with just being happy. Whatever I got on my mind, push it to the back until spend the time with the children, and then we'll figure it out later. I'll go, God, we'll figure it out later. What keeps me going is when the kids walk through the door and you see those smiling faces coming in the door and they're, good morning, Nunu. They want to give you a hug and they want to do this and they want to give you a kiss. I mean, they can't kiss us now. I really miss that. Just everything is going on, but at least I can get a little hug and everything, and the good morning and everything, and the smiling faces, that keeps me going. And then when it comes to the community, I look at the community as a family too. I have to, because the community is my family. And like my husband always say, we're a village. We're not just, I'm a parent over here, I'm a parent over here. We're a village. We try to help each other. I get knocks on my doors of people that I don't even know, but somebody told them, oh, if you go and knock on Nunu's door, she might have food for you. If you knock on Nunu's door, she might have Pampers and milk and stuff for your baby. If you knock on Nunu's door, she might have some clothes, or she can give your baby Christmas toys and stuff. So I get people knock on my doors sometime in the community. I have never met them before, but then I meet them. And then I have a friend for life. I really do. They see me in the street or the grocery store. Hey, Nunu, or if there's anything you need, so.
It really is surrounding. You're surrounding children and families, and they're surrounding you. That's lovely. That's really
a village. Great. It's a village here. We try to make it a village.
And you mentioned now, as you are wearing your masks, applying, COVID has obviously made a difference right now for all sorts of communities all across the country. And I'm certain you're aware, we as an organization really are trying to amplify how fragile the childcare system was prior to the pandemic. And now, as we're moving through the pandemic, really tough times for many individuals across communities, and certainly for childcare providers. And I was just curious, how are you all navigating COVID? What did that look like when COVID hit, and where you all are now? What has that journey been over this last year for you all as a program?
On one end, it's changed. The one that remains the same is any reputable childcare is going to ensure that their place is clean. The toys are clean, the atmosphere is fresh. So that's starting from day one, 30, 34, whatever years ago, way before it happened. So in that instance, that remains the same. But you're always concerned with, who walks in the door, because you never know where they might have come from. All of our parents wear masks. You still have to be concerned. In terms of children, we lost, maybe 50% of our children and things. So it definitely has a financial impact. We have to keep on going. We have people to serve. We're not looking to be heroes or anything like that. But just like, a grocery store person, a taxi driver, a fireman, policeman, just like they have to go to work, teachers, even though they're working from home, some of them, but there's a lot that are in school. childcare providers, the ones that can, we still have a service to perform. We're going to keep on going and keep on doing what we have to do.
You say, Patrick, that, you're not trying to be heroes, but I will tell you, you are. I know that those families think that you are, and, and I certainly think that you are too. It is a lot, but I can feel the love coming through the screen. You're raising so many various aspects for those that are out there listening that may not understand the complexity of what childcare is. Family engagement, family support, access to services, early childhood mental health. You spoke earlier about healthy foods, right? Early care and education providers, those that are providing childcare, it's not only a space, it's a way of being. One of the areas that I think is so critically important as we're moving forward, through COVID, there has been a real unveiling, I think, of disparities that have for generations lived. But now I think for, you'd have to work even harder now not to see disparities that are so apparent in so many communities and many communities of color. As many are talking about re-envisioning systems and re-envisioning the childcare system is one of the conversations that I know our organization is having. What does a transformed childcare system look like to you? If you had a magic wand, how would you like change to happen within childcare so that you all could do this work that you love so much?
Put daycare providers and parents at the table. You, as the ones that make the policies, you cannot tell us what we need. You can't tell us. You're not doing this. You're not here with us. Another thing too, what they need to do is pay us the way they pay the schools.
When she says getting paid based like schools are paid based on enrollment, not attendance. All right. Childcare needs to be paid based on enrollment, not attendance. If a child is there for half a day, instead of being paid for the full day, but yet we have staff. Childcare providers have staff that they have to pay for the full day because little Johnny might have went to the doctor's for 2 hours. You can't tell a staff member, okay, well, you take off for 2 hours, I'm not going to pay you. You won't have staff. You can't call your Con Ed or your Lyco or whoever, your electric company, and say, okay, listen, take off my bill for 2 hours because little Johnny and little Susie went to the doctor, so take that portion of their electricity and put that to the side. You can't do that. So that's the main thing. We need to be paid on par. In Westchester, thankfully, it might be across New York, but definitely in Westchester, through the pandemic, they paid providers that were able to stay open for unlimited absences. We thank them for that. Westchester and New York State can do it now through the pandemic. They should be able to do it all the time, where providers do not have to worry about those things.
So what I'm hearing, Patrick, too, is that there are policies that were implemented during the pandemic that should be sustainable policies, like whatever the reimbursement rates might be, or paying by enrollment versus attendance. Those were some policies that changed during COVID and should stay and remain as policies because they were beneficial through the pandemic, but they would have been beneficial before the pandemic and would be beneficial after the pandemic.
Right. And once a child is enrolled, and we're talking about subsidized children, not private pay, once a subsidized child is approved by the local Department of Social Services, that money basically is already funded for them for that year. So there's no reason, since it's already allocated, it's already funded, it's already in that budget, there's no reason for them to nickel and dime and say, okay, they're out 2 days, 3 days, or a week, we're not going to pay you. Or they're here 2 hours, 3 hours, we're not going to give you full time for the day, we're not going to give you part time. It's already allocated once they're approved, so there should be no reason why that can't stay in place all the time.
Children that age out and their parents are working late night and overnight, they shouldn't be in the house by themselves. And that's the situation we're going through with the young mother that has the 3 jobs. Her children, one of her daughters, like my husband said, is aged out. They're going to have to stay in the house by themselves at night while this woman is working her jobs. How is she going to be able to work her jobs, worrying about her children at home? There should be a program for aged out children that you continue to pay for at night or overnight parents for their children. They should at least put that in the program till they're at least 16 years old. and you know that they're capable of being home by themselves.
Deloris, thank you for that perspective. It's clear that you have a understanding, because to your point, you do this work every day, and our solutions should be centered in your experience that you have and the wisdom that you bring to the system. And you have such an understanding about babies and toddlers, infants and toddlers, and what they need and their special needs, as well as children who are older and what they need. And all of these children need supports, and all of these families need supports. But what I'm hearing is, from the beginning through school age, and making sure that we're centering solutions and bringing families and providers to the table to help to create those solutions. It enters your heart, I will say. I did not think that I was going to be an early childhood educator. I know I was going to go into this field when I graduated from college, and I went into a toddler room and fell in love, right? You fall in love and something speaks to your heart and you stay with it. And that's what I've done. There are many out there now who are maybe considering, maybe thinking about, either they want to study child development, or they're imagining they'd like to be a family childcare or have a childcare program of their own, or work at a center, or they're not sure what they're going to do, but maybe this is something. What would you say to them?
Well, the first thing, don't think of a person, the children and the parents, as my meal ticket or money. You can't do that. You have to think of the parent and the child when they come as, these are people that I love, and this is what I love to do. That's the way you have to think of the children and the parents when they come through the door. Not that, this is $250, that's $300. Then that means that's going to be the price of love. The 300 price is going to go further than the 250 price, if I'm the way I feel. When you open your doors, you have to open your doors with a lot of wisdom, a lot of care, definitely a lot of belts under your thing. You have to be a doctor, a lawyer. I mean, everything you could think of. You're going to have to be a social worker. You're going to have to be a little bit of everything. So if I was you, I'll read up on what it is to, tell people, give people advice and different stuff like that. But the most important thing to become a child care provider is you have to have a lot of heart. You have to open it up with your heart. You can't open it up with a nickel and dime. That would not be fair to the parents or the children. And you definitely got to have a lot of patience. I think you have to have more patience for the parents than you do the children.
Well, I think the only other thing is hook up with your local child care council. That is very, very important. In Westchester, we have a great child care council. Get in touch with them, ask them any questions you want. They will help you tremendously. I would say to a certain extent, Department of Social Services. And if you're starting out, if maybe you just came out of college or, schooling, you might want to work at not only a center, but a home-based childcare, because we're home-based. You want to go into that field and take a look at that, see how they operate, and hopefully that you get a good provider that you're working with that is impassioned about what they do as we are.
Thank you for that, Patrick. And I heard how important it is to think about the path of child development, the path of things like the Child Care Council, and the path of family engagement, obviously, right. and the path of business. You have a lot of expert hats to wear, but connection with the community of others that are doing similar work is also really helpful.
Right,
right. At the bottom, this is a business. At the very bottom, if you're not focusing on the child first, and that's what she does so well. She focuses on the children and family, and I just piggyback after that.
I have to tell you both that I am so appreciative for your time, particularly given just the moments that I've had you this afternoon with the multiple families and multiple children, the beautiful pictures in the background, but also the energy and the movement that's been happening. There's never a dull moment, I don't think, at Dee's Tots. That's the message that I'm receiving. And I also know that there's a lot of compassion and passion and care that's happening there as well. And I so appreciate and admire you for the work that you do, for your participation and through the night. And also, I know you do this work every day. And I just really want to honor you for that. And thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me and sharing a little bit about the work that you do. This has really been terrific. This film has given us all such a gift. As has been said, it truly is a love letter to childcare providers. Thank you for joining me for this 10-part series, A Seat at the Table. You can subscribe to A Seat at the Table with Lynette Fraga on Apple Podcasts or wherever you stream. Visit www.childcareaware.org/the table to learn more. Join us next time at the table.
This podcast is hosted by Lynette M. Fraga, CEO of Child Care Aware of America. This show was produced by Meg Bialis and edited by Liz Twilley. You can subscribe to A Seat at the Table, Conversations on Leadership, Equity, and Innovation on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. A Seat at the Table is a production of Child Care Aware of America, the nation's leading voice on child care. Learn more at childcareaware.org/the table.